In May 1945, Germany surrendered, and with it fell one of the most dreaded weapons of the Second World War, the Tiger tank. Across battlefields spanning from Normandy to the Eastern Front, hundreds of these colossal machines lay abandoned, destroyed, or captured. The Allies were now in possession of the war's most powerful tanks, initiating a race to locate, evaluate, and determine the fate of every Tiger they could locate. In early May 1945, as the Third Reich collapsed, the Panzerwaffe had virtually ceased to exist as a fighting force. Tiger I and Tiger II tanks stood immobilized across Europe as victims of fuel shortages, mechanical failures, and overwhelming Allied firepower. Many had been abandoned by their crews, left alongside roads, in forests, or at the margins of battlefields where they had fought their final engagements. By the time Germany's unconditional surrender was enacted on May 8, 1945, approximately 1,800 Tiger tanks had been produced across both variants. The vast majority were already destroyed in combat, but several hundred still remained, scattered across occupied territories. These survivors faced varied fates. Some were intact in German depots, while others had been disabled by their own crews to prevent capture. Others had simply exhausted their fuel in the war's chaotic final weeks. At proving grounds like Kummersdorf and Hillers, Allied investigators discovered Tigers in various states of completion, alongside technical documentation, inventories of spare parts, and training manuals. In Bavaria, American forces uncovered Tigers at the Henschel production facilities. In northern Germany and Austria, British units came upon abandoned heavy tank battalions. On the Eastern Front, Soviet armies overran Tiger positions in Silesia, East Prussia, and Czechoslovakia. The variety of their conditions surprised Allied tank officers. Some Tigers appeared nearly pristine, preserved by units that had surrendered without a fight. Others showed catastrophic damage from internal demolition charges. Their turrets were blown off by crews determined to deny them to the enemy. Many bore the scars of intense combat, including armor penetrations, track damage, engine fires, and the marks of anti-tank weaponry that had ultimately stopped them. Unlike fighters or bombers that could be flown away, Tigers presented an immediate logistical challenge. Each tank weighed over 50 tons, the Tiger II even heavier at 70 tons. Moving them required specialized equipment, rail transport, or heavy recovery vehicles. The Allied Control Commission then established strict protocols. All German armored vehicles were to be immobilized, their main armaments disabled, and their fuel supplies drained. A debate then emerged within Allied commands. Some argued the Tigers should be destroyed as potent symbols of German military might. Others recognized their intelligence value, particularly the armor composition, optical systems, and the legendary 88mm gun. What became evident in the weeks after surrender was that the Tiger's legend would greatly outlast the tank itself, even as the machines were dismantled or tested to destruction. As Germany surrendered, Allied powers launched immediate programs to seize and study the Tiger tanks. Each major power had faced Tigers in combat and lost vehicles to their guns. Now they had the chance. To comprehend the mechanics of these machines and the reasons for their formidable combat effectiveness, the United States acted with haste. U.S. armored divisions had confronted Tiger tanks in North Africa, Italy, and France, invariably with caution and frequently sustaining significant casualties. Intelligence teams from the Ordnance Department fanned out across Germany and Austria, tasked with locating pristine specimens for thorough evaluation. At the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, engineers prepared facilities to accommodate the captured German panzers. Among the initial Tiger tanks transported to America was a vehicle seized in North Africa during the Tunisian campaign in 1943. By the war's conclusion, more examples had arrived from the European theater. American trials concentrated on armor penetration, assessing the performance of various anti-tank weapons against the Tiger's armor plate at different angles and distances. Engineers directed fire from American 75mm, 76mm, and 90mm guns at captured hulls, meticulously documenting which projectiles were capable of defeating the armor and under what specific circumstances. The findings validated what tank crews had long understood. The Tiger's frontal armor proved exceptionally resistant to penetration by standard Allied tank armaments at typical combat ranges. testing revealed that the 75mm gun mounted on most Sherman tanks was unable to reliably breach a Tiger's frontal plate, even at point-blank range. The 76mm gun performed more effectively, yet it still faced considerable difficulty. Only the 90mm cannon on late-war tanks such as the M26 Pershing could reliably engage a Tiger from the front. The British, for their part, had their own arduous history with the Tiger tank. From their initial encounter in Tunisia to the fierce battles in Normandy, British armoured crews had come to dread the 88mm gun, which could neutralise their Cromwell and Churchill tanks from distances where they could not effectively retaliate. At the School of Tank Technology in Chertsey and the ranges at Lulworth, British engineers undertook comprehensive trials on captured specimens. These British evaluations scrutinised not only the armour but also the Tiger's complex mechanical systems. Engineers methodically disassembled the engines, transmissions, and suspension components, documenting the sophisticated engineering principles that rendered the Tiger so formidable, yet also so mechanically intricate. British reports highlighted the interleaved road wheel system, which, while providing a superior ride quality, was susceptible to the accumulation of mud and ice. They meticulously recorded the Maybach engine's power output alongside its high fuel consumption and demanding maintenance requirements. At Bovington, a Tiger I, captured in Tunisia, became a central focus of the British evaluation program. Test drivers commented on the tank's unexpected maneuverability for a vehicle of its mass, a characteristic facilitated by its advanced steering system. Gunners lauded the superb optical quality of the German sights and the exceptional accuracy of the 88mm cannon. However, the reports also underscored issues with reliability and the sheer complexity of in-field repairs, as well as the immense logistical burden that each individual Tiger represented. The Soviet Union had confronted more Tiger tanks than any other Allied nation. From the titanic clash at Kursk to the final battle for Berlin, Soviet tank armies engaged in desperate struggles against Germany's heavy panzer battalions. Soviet trophy brigades methodically advanced across occupied German territory and Eastern Europe, securing every Tiger tank they could locate. Intact specimens were then transported to the testing grounds at Kubinka, just outside of Moscow. Soviet evaluation procedures were both exhaustive and uncompromising. Engineers proceeded to fire captured German armaments at the Tigers to systematically identify their vulnerabilities. They then tested Soviet 85mm, 100mm, and 122mm guns against them, against Tiger armor, to determine optimal combat tactics. Stalin himself took a direct interest in German heavy tank development, compelling Soviet designers to apply these lessons to new projects like the IS-3 and 10 heavy tanks. The Soviets also acquired Tigers under unique circumstances. For instance, in Prague, they discovered specimens undergoing repair or modification. In Silesia, complete training facilities were captured intact, which housed Tigers used for crew instruction. Several of these machines were restored to operational condition and briefly employed for propaganda, showcasing Soviet superiority over German military hardware. A rivalry emerged among the Allies for the rarest specimens. A late-production Tiger II was particularly coveted as it represented the apex of German heavy tank engineering. Factories and castles contained partially finished hulls and turrets. At testing grounds, prototype models provided insights into development paths that did not reach production. This race to acquire these machines reflected the growing tensions that would define the Cold War. German tank crews and engineers played multifaceted roles in this process. Some were detained for interrogation, while others volunteered information in exchange for better treatment or employment opportunities. Their technical expertise assisted Allied teams in operating and maintaining captured Tigers, explaining maintenance protocols, common failure points, and combat tactics. Allied experts documented everything, including internal layouts and ammunition storage, crew positions, optical systems, and the advanced fire control equipment that made the 88mm gun so lethal. The range of Tiger variants discovered also intrigued Allied investigators. Although the Tiger I had remained relatively consistent during its production, late-war models displayed modifications based on combat experience. Engineers discovered Tigers with different track designs and modified vision ports, as well as experimental armor configurations. The Tiger II revealed even more notable developments, with its early production models having a different turret design than subsequent versions. At Henschel facilities, Allied teams uncovered schematics for unproduced variants, including proposed tank destroyers and recovery vehicles based upon the Tiger chassis. Of particular value were the Tigers recovered with their complete documentation. Some units maintained meticulous maintenance logs, which recorded every mechanical issue, each repair, and every combat engagement. These records offered a glimpse into the Tiger's operational reality that technical specifications alone could not reveal. They detailed average breakdown rates, component lifespans, and the extensive spare parts demands that made Tiger battalions so difficult to sustain on the battlefield. Allied logistics officers carefully studied these documents, realizing that the greatest weakness of German armor was not its design, but its sustainability. By late 1946, the main intelligence-gathering effort was complete. Dozens of Tigers had been tested, measured, and thoroughly analyzed. Their design secrets were documented in thousands of pages of technical reports. This intelligence would influence the next generation of Allied tank design, from armor configurations to armament and targeting systems. However, a different destiny awaited the majority of surviving Tiger tanks. A much grimmer fate: systematic destruction. By late 1945, the Allied Control Council had issued its orders, unambiguous directives. Germany was forbidden from retaining any armored fighting vehicles. The Tiger tanks, which had been set aside for technical evaluation, constituted a mere fraction of the war's survivors. The rest, dispersed throughout Europe in varying conditions of serviceability, were designated for disposal. This procedure differed based on location and the specific state of each vehicle. Within Germany proper, former military installations and training areas were converted into disposal sites, grounds. Those Tigers considered unsuitable for analysis were methodically destroyed. Some were utilized as targets for Allied gunnery exercises, giving crews practice against the very armor they had once battled. Others were disassembled for scrap metal, their formidable armor plating severed by cutting torches before being shipped to steel foundries. At Bergen-Hohne in northern Germany, British military units gathered a significant collection of German armor slated for demolition. Tiger tanks were arrayed with Panthers, assault guns, and assorted vehicles, while engineers analyzed the most effective methods of rendering the tanks inert, such as removing armaments, draining fluids, disabling engines, or through their outright demolition with high explosives. The turrets of certain Tigers were violently detached, a dramatic yet permanent form of neutralization. In Normandy, several Tigers that were disabled during the intense campaign were left at the locations where they were defeated. A few were interred by local officials during the clearing of roads and farmlands. Others were hauled to collection depots and dismantled. The French military briefly entertained the idea of retaining some German armor for its own forces, but the logistical hurdles of maintaining Tigers, coupled with their prodigious fuel requirements, rendered this option unfeasible. The Soviets adopted an alternative strategy in their occupation zones. While numerous Tigers were destroyed, a substantial number were conserved for technical study and exhibition. Museums in Moscow and Leningrad acquired specimens for public display, showcasing Soviet victory over German engineering. A select few Tigers were even returned to operational status for propaganda films and military parades, although these were clear exceptions to the rule. Economic necessity was a primary driver behind much of the destruction. Post-war Europe confronted severe metal shortages. The thousands of tons of steel, copper, and other materials embodied in abandoned German armor constituted a vital resource pool. Dismantling Tigers and other Panzers helped fuel reconstruction initiatives. For numerous communities recovering from the conflict, scrap dealers arriving to dismantle nearby Tigers offered employment and income during a period of great hardship. Environmental concerns also became a factor, as abandoned Tigers leaked fuel, oil, and other fluids that could contaminate the soil and water. Local administrations insisted on their removal from farmlands, forests, and waterways. In certain instances, Tigers driven into rivers or lakes during combat were left in situ, considered too difficult or costly to salvage. Many of these submerged wrecks persist to this day, occasionally discovered by divers or revealed during droughts. By 1948, the great majority of Tiger tanks had been eliminated. To remain, wrecks on the battlefield were either dismantled or interred, and depot reserves were systematically eliminated. The few preserved within museums and testing facilities constituted nearly all that survived of the 1,800 units manufactured. The swiftness and completeness of this eradication underscored the Allied resolve to permanently neutralize Germany's military potential. In contrast to aircraft, which could be stored or repurposed for civilian roles, the Tiger tank possessed no non-military utility. These were purpose-built instruments of conflict, and in the post-war era, they had no practical place beyond museum collections and evaluation sites. Although the majority of Tigers were demolished, a select few were acquired for foreign evaluation or long-term preservation. These surviving examples provide a window into how the vehicle's legend expanded, even as the tanks themselves vanished from existence. The French military retained a number of captured Tigers for purposes of assessment and instruction. At Saumur, the French Armour School employed a Tiger I to educate instructors and to showcase German engineering principles to its cadets. French engineers meticulously studied the 88mm cannon, seeking to integrate its lessons into their own tank destroyer concepts. By the early 1950s, significant maintenance hurdles and a scarcity of parts compelled France to decommission these tanks. The specimen at Saumur survived this period and is still on public display. Great Britain also retained several Tigers for museum exhibition and ongoing technical analysis. The specific tank held at Bovington would become one of the most renowned surviving examples, ultimately restored to operational status many decades later. Various British technical academies utilized Tiger tanks as educational tools, permitting students to examine German engineering directly. Once this pedagogical function ceased, several of these tanks were transferred to museum collections instead of being dismantled. The largest collection of surviving Tigers was maintained by the Soviet Union. Institutions throughout the Soviet bloc were allocated specimens from Moscow to Warsaw and Prague. Some were restored and exhibited with their battle scars intact, symbolizing Soviet victory. Others were placed in storage, periodically displayed for military demonstrations or commemorative historical events. The Soviets' access to numerous examples enabled a more thorough analysis than what Western allies were able to perform. After the war, no nation made any attempt to operate the Tiger tank. Its mechanical intricacy, high fuel consumption, and demanding parts requirements rendered it impractical for any armed force to sustain. Unlike the Bf-109 or Ju-52, which had limited post-war foreign use, the Tiger was far too specialized and resource-demanding to warrant keeping in an operational state. Nevertheless, the Tiger's formidable reputation meant that its destruction slowed as historical consciousness increased. By the 1960s, military historians and museum curators acknowledged how few examples remained. Consequently, efforts were initiated to find battlefield remnants and retrieve these tanks before they were lost forever. A number of Tigers were extracted from bogs, forests, and rural fields throughout Eastern Europe. While many were incomplete or severely damaged, even partial chassis held immense historical significance. The restoration of the Tiger tank evolved into a highly specialized discipline. Institutions such as Bovington dedicated years to returning their Tiger I to full working order, a project which concluded in the 1990s. Other organizations concentrated on static preservation, which involved stabilizing corroded sections and conserving what was left. Private. While collectors sometimes managed to acquire Tiger components, intact examples of the tank were exceptionally scarce and highly prized. Presently, a mere handful of complete Tigers survive globally. The Tiger I housed at Bovington is the sole specimen that remains operational, though it is run infrequently to safeguard the invaluable machine. Other extant examples are displayed in museums throughout Russia, France, Germany, Britain, and the United States. Each one symbolizes not just a solitary vehicle, but the entire production legacy of a weapon that redefined armored combat. A number of Tiger II examples also endure, including the famed tank at Legacies in Belgium. This King Tiger was left by its crew during the Battle of the Bulge and has since remained in the village as a monument. Others are located at Kubinka, Fort Benning, and several European museums, serving as silent witnesses to the final years of the Third Reich. The sheer rarity of surviving tigers has made them objects of profound historical fascination. Each example is meticulously studied, photographed, and documented by researchers hoping to uncover details lost when the vast majority were destroyed. Rare components, from periscopes and radios to ammunition racks, are carefully documented upon their discovery. The few tigers that endure are now priceless artifacts, their historical value beyond measure. Survival through the immediate post-war demolition phase was largely a matter of chance. Tanks that happened to be in a fortunate position, captured by forces inclined toward preservation, or simply missed during the rush to scrap everything else, were spared. The systematic purges of the 1940s mean that what survives today constitutes less than 1% of all tigers, produced fragments of a legend that grew as the machines themselves vanished. The history of tigers after 1945 is a tale of swift annihilation followed by a slow recognition of what was lost. In their determination to dismantle German military might, the Allies eradicated most examples of what would become one of history's most scrutinized tanks. By the time historians and museums sought to preserve tigers, precious few remained. Modern efforts to locate these tanks are ongoing. Periodically, a wreck is unearthed in a forest or recovered from a riverbed. Each discovery generates immense interest, even when the vehicle is damaged beyond restoration. These finds remind us how swiftly even the most imposing machines can vanish, and how the post-war era reshaped the legacy of German armor, just as it reshaped the legacy of the Luftwaffe. If you found this analysis insightful, explore what became of the Panzerwaffe Panther tanks after the Second World War next. It details how Germany's most prolific heavy tank was captured, studied, and dispersed across the globe in the war's aftermath. Please like this video, subscribe, and enable notifications for more. Thank you for watching.